We were here 7 or 8 years ago for our first show, and it's always a great privilege, and thank you again for having us back. What I'd like to do, even though you can't take any food or drinks into the gallery, is that we could go into the gallery so I can speak about the work rather than just extemporaneously start here. But I will say that in addition to the travels that we do, I am more an imaginative person rather than sticking to the actual facts of a place or a particular situation. So imagination plays a very, very important role for me, and many times I'm involved with light, I'm involved with color, texture, all the things that are the formal elements of art rather than just a straight depiction of the scene or the place that I've been. Not to say that Mary Lou's work is more specific, but I think that the difference between the two will become very apparent when you see it in the gallery. What we have here is a sampling, and it's just a small sampling of what I'm involved with, because none of my encaustics are here, because I took a workshop at R&F Encaustics when they were in Kingston, New York, and it was one of the turning points in my development in terms of working with a new medium, because I've always loved the film portraits down at the Metropolitan Museum and at the Brooklyn Museum. They're just fantastic. And encaustic involves working with with wax, burning the color into the form, and it gives you well, first of all, it's instant. You don't have to have any drying time whatsoever. It's just bingo, that's there. And I've done a lot of encaustics, and unfortunately, I can only do them outside in the summertime because it's very, very toxic. And I had problems when I was a welder with interior disturbances. So I'm very cautious of the toxicity of certain materials and certain processes. I've done many oil paintings. This is straight oil. This is a mixed media piece where paper collage, painted paper that I've collected on various trips. I remember when we first went to Italy, my cousin was aghast at my tearing off pieces of posters. She said, "You can't do that." And I said, "Well, I'm doing it." Because I wanted them and I wanted to use that in my work. And I found out later that Nino Rotello had used the same process and had the same approach to his work. And I have a great big beautiful book at home of his work. So this is partially paper, partially paint, partially watercolor. So it's a mixed media piece. This one, which has a very strong landscape quality, and I wanted that, but I didn't want to do a specific landscape. So there's elements in here that speak to me and speak to the kind of spirituality that I'm looking for in a work. And it's, again, pieces of paper, paint, ink, etc. This one is a straight watercolor with ink. This one is a little piece of collage on there, but watercolor. And again, you can see the relationship between the two and the relationship to the piece over there. This painting is very recent. I decided to try to incorporate some of the things that were happening in the collage, in my collage pieces, and I wanted to get something that was rather thin and fresh. And I think I've kind of succeeded in that with the transparencies, with the linear work that's in there, the inscribing. You'll notice that it's an inscribed line that goes across there, and in addition to the painted lines that are in there. I love scratching through. I love putting a lot of marks on the paint. marks in the paint and so forth. Difference in tonality, etc. And basically working with the warm colors, reds, yellows, oranges, and so forth, with a little bit of gray in here and so forth. I think this is a pretty exciting piece for myself. I love the fact that there's bits of red screaming through here, that works this way. And I like the fact that there's transparency, there's opaqueness, there's all of these different things that are happening in here that I try to get in other works as well. I just love the fact that this red piece comes forward and it goes back at the same time, depending upon what area you're looking at. I like the fact that there is a kind of wash quality to some of these areas. I like the fact that this red is butted next to that black, and then it creeps up in here, and then it's re-echoed over here again, and then so forth. Sometimes I look at a place, or I'm in a spot where I'm thinking of architectural forms, and then I don't want to do those architectural forms per se. I want to reinterpret them. So I'll try to get something of the buildings, something of the forms and so forth, but without being very, very specific about it. I think very, very interesting, because the format is such that when you're working that small, you have to make a kind of a jewel-like surface to it. And I think I've succeeded on both of them. Even though they're not bright, they do have that quality. And I'm influenced especially by Kurt Switters, by Burri. Burri is an Italian artist who lived, he had a recent show at the Guggenheim Museum that was fantastic. I just loved it. And I remember being influenced by Burri when we first got married in 1965. We went to Boston, and at the time, they had books for sale in Filey's basement. And I bought this beautiful Burri book for $5. I still remember I paid $5 for it, which was, for me, kind of a stretch. Seeing that show at the Guggenheim just reinforced that whole idea. Unfortunately, the book was borrowed and never returned to us. And so we bought the other Burri book. These two are influenced by not so much Burri, because he did a lot with burning and stitching and suturing and so forth. He was a medical doctor. He was interned in Texas. And he, because of his medical training, used to suture a lot. So I did that on some of my canvases as well, some of my mixed media pieces as well. I'm also influenced by Tapies, the Spanish painter, by, many, many people that work with collage and so forth. Interest in not so much transposing or stating what is obvious, but rather than stating that particular aspect of the landscape or the scene in front of me, trying to interpret it in a different way, in a more spiritual way, so that it becomes more poetic. And I think I've succeeded on some of them, and some of them I think, I've hit the mark, and others I don't think I have as well. Inscribing in there, like this doesn't have too much of that going on in it, but other paintings that I have, I use an etcher's tool.
Okay,
And
that was my next question.
It's a real nice sharp point on it. Or else I'll use a nail, or else end of a toothbrush, end of a paintbrush.
He actually invented a tool to help him inscribe some of those paintings, pencil and the drill.
One time I wanted to get a particular quality of line. So I sharpened a small pencil and I put it inside a drill, regular drill.
Oh, wow.
And then I drew with it on the canvas. And I remember one of my former students said to me, that line is so unusual. How did you get it? And I said, it's an invention. I'm not sure I want to tell you. But I finally did tell her. I told her it was a drill and it was a pencil, a short pencil that was put in the drill.
Wow.
And it gets,
Yeah, right,
Yeah.
sanding machine. Oh, yeah.
You can see right
Yeah.
Oh,
here.
yeah, yeah.
That's
Right.
been
And-
sanded.
Right.
Right.
Then he gets a lot of texture.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm sorry. Yeah, that's right. And I do have some inscribed lines in here, right in there. So. And these are inscribed as well. But I like the interplay between the line and the color area behind it or with it. And you can see here that this has been, sometimes I use printmaking devices. For instance, I'll put a color down and then I'll put a piece of paper on top of it and pull it off. I did a whole series of paintings. When I didn't have a studio, I used to go down to school at Western Connecticut State University in Danbury, and I would work on the weekends on the floor. And I was working with a lot of turpentine, a lot of oil paint mixed together, and I would put it on there flat on the floor, and then I would put paper and plastic on top of it and let it dry for a certain period of time, and then I would lift it off and throw them out. And then one time, Carlos Dyer, who was the curator for the Aldridge Museum, came to see my work, and he said, "Why don't you leave them on there?" And I said, "Yeah, well, I could, but I haven't." But he said, "Yeah, I think that would be kind of a nice development for you." And I did that, and I have many paintings that are a direct result of his input on the process. Put paper, I'll put plastic.
Shredded paper.
Okay.
Shredded paper, I use a lot of shredded paper because that gives you a lovely quality when you take it off. And other materials like that, rope, twine, wire.
Sort of a printmaking process.
Yeah, where you print on it and you take it off. Yeah,
But now you're leaving it on sometimes.
yeah. Now I leave it on.
Oh, I'd love to see
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
This was a particular scene at Cape Cod where the light was so fantastic. The light, actually, it was kind of a cloudy day, and the sea seemed to be rising up, and then the shaft of light came down, and I said, now how can I capture that quality without being so representational that it becomes just a beachscape? I've done a lot of natural, realistic beachscapes. And this is my resolvement of it. You know, a line here, a line there, no line here.
So it becomes a painting about light rather than
Right.
just
It's beautiful.
Like,
Yeah, I love it.
so that's one of the,
Where on Cape Cod?
Yeah.
actually it was at Long Beach, right near Centerville.